morning. Good morning, everyone. It is 7:30 in the a.m. here in Africa. And yesterday we spoke about operating in love. Now, part two of this, get a little deeper. What happens when it's hard to show love? You know, when it's hard to show love, what do we do? You know, and when I thought about this, what came to mind was Paul in the book of 2 Corinthians, chapter 12, verse 9. You know, Paul was being buffeted by Satan. And Paul brought this care to God. And in return, God told him that his grace is sufficient for him. God said, my grace is sufficient for you. That word grace, what does grace mean? Grace is the unmerited favor or love of God, which we don't deserve, but he gives it anyway. You know, truth being told, we all deserve hellfire and brimstone. But God, not that kind of God. You know, he wants to love us. He loves us. He said his grace is sufficient for you. His grace is sufficient for me. And it goes on to say, I gotta say this. When we are weak, he is strong. That goes on further in the 2 Corinthians chapter 12. So Paul said he'd rather rejoice in his infirmities, his physical weakness, his physical weakness, mental weakness, basically things you go through when you're aging, infirmities. So he'd rather rejoice in his infirmities because he knows God has him. So he rejoices in that. That kind of goes back when we were talking about give praise and thanks for everything we go through. Because he is with us. His grace is sufficient for us. So when we're in those situations where it's hard to love, know that God's grace is sufficient for us. You know, and we find ourselves struggling to love something or something that's happened, it's because we operate from our own will. I'm told that that it's best, it's wise to yield to God than to progress in our own will. Because in our own will, we burn out, we get tired. You know, it's hard to love constantly. It's hard to love what's not beautiful. It's hard to love sometimes what's ugly. When people behave ugly, it's hard to still love. Well, that's because we operate in our own will. We need to rely on God, his love. Yes, he says love, but also we have to do it in his will because our will burn out. The love runs dry in us. So we need that joy of God. We need his grace, you know. So let's keep that in mind today. You know, when it's hard to love, ask yourself, am I operating out of my will? Or do I need to rely more on God in this situation? Because when we're in our will, our love can turn to hate. Our love can turn to hate or other negative emotions. They can run wild, that we're allowed to run wild when we're operating on our own will, on our own steam. So let's rely more on God today and continue to operate out of love. I love you guys. I'll see you next time. Oh, if you feel the urge that God put on your heart to give to this ministry, right now our Cash App is Arteus Grier. That's ARTEUSGRIER. And when we give, when you give into a ministry, you, as I said before, you trust in God for what he's already done. It's a show of love. God gave us his best. So what we do, we give. Not only to honor, but to show that we trust in him, that he's got this. So under no obligation should you feel pressured to give. You give out of a cheerful heart. You know, you don't give out of necessity. You don't give out of obligations or fear. No, you move as the Holy Spirit guides you to move, to give. God bless you guys. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.